Hey YouTube, welcome back to EagleX TCG, and guess what? We're here with another Gundam Card Game video. Now, the subject of this video is going to be basically an overview of the state of the game as of the end of Set 1. In exactly a month, we will have Set 2 out, but Set 1 is a solved format. No new decks are really coming out, and people are pretty much set in their ways and have a pretty good fundamental grasp of the game. But I do want to talk about the pros and cons of the game now that we've been able to put in countless rounds, now that we have regional champions. Like, this is pretty much what I think the game needs to improve upon, what it's already doing well, and so on, so forth. So if you like this sort of content, make sure you like the video and maybe join the EagleX fam today by clicking that subscribe button. Either way, let's get into the content. So we're going to start off with the pros first and foremost. Now, I'm going to start off with what I think this game does better than any other card game on the planet, not just the ones in Bandai's wheelhouse, and that is going to be the character fantasy. The pilot system this game has allows you to have your units, but also have your pilots. You're able to pair your pilots with their signature units, giving the unit haste, essentially giving it that link and having it being able to attack the first turn it's out. You can put your favorite pilots in other units and then just have their basic stats, maybe even their effects transfer over. And then there's just so many mixing and matchings that you can do with this. But because of the pilots being their own cards, you have the ability to have alt arts that have your favorite units in a crazy cool new artistic vision. You have your pilots with so much drip, so much like visual appeal going on there. And I think honestly, when it comes to this game, character fantasy has never been higher. There has not been a single card game I have played in my like 15 years of card gaming, just like, I don't know, like what's the word I'm looking for? Tenure? Yeah, tenure. That has made me feel this invested when it comes to the IP versus the decks you're playing. I think that's unparalleled. The next thing I think this game does really well is the way the decks are built. A lot of Bandai's games have this limitation. You play with the color of your leader, or you know, like things like that. But this allows you just to choose two colors and go from there. And this is very loose, and it may seem a little constrictive right now, but the further we go in to this game, the more sets we get, the better this is going to feel. Just two colors and that's just your only restriction is a very loose way that we can build a lot of different interactions on, and you know, stuff like that. I think that this is going to be something that's just feels better and better the further we get into the game. And I also want to say, I think the last thing that I think this game does straight out the gates that's really cool is actually the way it forces players to address trading. Like not just skipping over bodies, managing effective trades, managing trades that leave you with bodies but rob your opponent of their bodies. I think that this is something that the game, that the Bandai card game sphere severely lacks. And outside of the Bandai card game sphere, MTG is the thing that really comes to mind when it comes to having this skill as a functional, like, you know, just reflex. And I like that layer of the game a lot. Now, it does kind of feed into the problems in some points, but it's only Set 1, so I don't think that's gonna be a problem forever. But those are the things that I think this game does the best. I think that this game has a very strong character fantasy, which is going to make sure that the casual fan base is all hands on deck, which is going to keep this game healthy for sets to come. Now, on top of that, like I said, I think the deck building leaves a lot of room for innovation. We saw so many shifts going throughout the first season of this game, and there will be more and more as we get more and more cards, and I love that. And then just circling back around, I do like the emphasis on trading bodies on board. This is like a war of attrition in most cases, and it's very thematic of a show that's generally about politics and war involving giant mechs. Now we have to move on to the bad. I have to put this just right here as the number one negative point about the game. It's the variance. The variance in this game is extremely high for a multitude of reasons. One, there are very few cards in this game that actually plus you. Most of the cards are breaking even or sometimes just stemming the bleeding. When it comes to the only +1 in the game, I believe, Show of Resolve, you get to drop a card from your hand, you're paying 3 and you're drawing 2. That's a +1. However, cards like Overflowing Affection are simply break evens. They are break evens, and that can get really rough. Then You have cards that can even minus you, such as something like Tall Geese and Zex. If you swing over one body, you'll get a singular draw. If you swing over a second body, you will likely end your own Tall Geese and get a draw. And this essentially means that you traded 2 cards from your hand and then you lost a linked pilot on board to draw 2 cards. That's a neg. That's still a neg. You lost the body tempo in exchange for, I mean, you took 2 bodies from them, you drew 2 cards. It really can be a little like situational, but a lot of these cards are going to be neg ones, and that's going to be a little rough on your hand. On top of that, you have a lot of neg ones. You don't really have a lot of pluses at all, but you're essentially seeing 1 free card a turn. You don't have to use a card to put into your resource zone, much like Dragon Ball Super, but you are going to draw a card, and then this game is focused mostly around 2 card combos, so the hand dwindles fairly quickly. But back on to variants. Another issue about variants is that while there isn't much draw to the game, there really isn't that much search. We have very limited search. Sarzaku 2, the path to victory or defeat, and there's like a couple more sprinkled in there. But you really don't have that much search in this game, so the consistency tends to be lower. And low draw, low search equals low consistency. Low consistency means that you're not seeing the same pieces over and over again, it means that each game can be slightly different, and it means that you are very much so prone to just bricking and never seeing the cards that you need, even when they're at the maximum copies in your deck. This also is going to be compiled by the fact that you don't get the cards in your shields unless they burst to your hand, which are designed to do that, or you take them to your hand yourself with some sort of effect like a base, which means that you can really get unlucky with having a 4 of having 2 copies of those in your shields, but also having 2 copies near the bottom of your deck, never seeing either of them, because even if your opponent walks you down, you were just losing those cards to the trash. So I definitely think that that is a very big miss when it comes to the design of this game. And between the no draw, or little to no draw, the little to no search, and the shield going to trash in most occasions, there are just so many cards per game that are not accessible by you. They will be trashed from damage. They will be never seen at the bottom of the deck. Either way, they are inaccessible to you, and that makes your deck just less consistent just by existing. The next part I want to talk about that's kind of is that this is a low resource game. As I stated before, there's very little draw. There's very little plussing in this game. Most of the plays are minuses or hard minuses. And with that being said, once you get to a certain point of the game, you're in a simplified game state. Now, this is for every game. Every game has simplified game states. You get to a point where you guys are both top decking, hoping that somebody brings more advantage off the top of their deck than somebody else. However, Gundam can get to a simplified game state at the earliest turn 5 or 6. We actually saw it in the card fest. If you guys noticed, aggro player gassed out on turn 5, was top decking for the rest of the game, hoping he could close it out. That is insane to know that 5 turns into a game, you could end up with no hand. In most cases, by the time you are at 8 to 9 resources, both you guys are top decking. It's kind of an issue. But because of this means that games really have their best turns about turn 4, turn 5, and then going into turn 6. Those are the turns where most things pop off, unless you're an aggro deck and you've been blowing your load like early on, playing out these 1 costs. But overall, this becomes a real big issue when it comes to games that go on past, the first 5-6 turns. And it could feel really bad when you guys are going tit for tat, and then all of a sudden your opponent just pulls the 1 pilot they needed, or the 1 unit with the pilot in hand, in order to tip the scales by playing a body that can attack that turn, affect the board that turn, get an effect that can maybe bounce something, burn something, rest something so it can be swung on. And then it spirals from there, because the first turn that your opponent's able to stick a body that gets forward advantage and then stays on the board, that turn, it starts to snowball. So I think that this leads to a very gaming experience. The next part that's kind of a really bad feeling is that this game is best of 1, but unlike every other Bandai game, you don't have a leader. Pretty much. I mean, I know Digimon doesn't really have one, and Union Arena I can dabble, but for One Piece and Dragon Ball, you have leaders. And having leaders means that you can at least kind of see where you need to mulligan, how you need to mulligan, by just seeing the reveal at the beginning of the game. But Gundam is a game where, because of the level resource system, a rush deck catching you off guard with no low to the ground blockers, no low to the ground anything, can really just blow you to smithereens. There are hands that would work wonders in a mid-range mirror or against Gundam Wing that just won't cut it against an aggro deck, and you have no way of knowing, so you have to just kind of pick the most balanced hand, and the most balanced hand can sometimes get you killed against a deck that wants the game to go a little slower. And so it's kind of rough, but the mulligan I feel like almost works against you, because you really just have to roll the dice that you just didn't feel out the matchup that was going to wreck the hand that you kept. And I think that's a shame, to be honest. I think that this game definitely deserves a better chance at being a competitive game, and I think the high variance as well as the bad conditions for mulliganing makes this game very, very, very susceptible to a janky competitive format. That's just me. Now I want to next talk about what we've seen in set 2 so far, and really kind of dive into what I think this game could change in order to kind of course correct this. Still watching? Hope so. And if you are, you probably like the video. So if that's the case, like the video. Maybe even think about hitting that subscribe button and joining the EagleX fam today. That being said, you can always go in the description, check out my links to see my Discord, my Twitch channel, which I am trying to get over 1,000 followers if you want to help out by clicking that button too. And my second channel, Universe X, where I play all the video games that I can't play on a card game channel, including SD Gundam G Generation Eternal, soon to be Digimon Time Stranger, soon to be Pokemon Legends AZ, and more in the future, like Dragon Ball Gexen Squadron. So that being said, let's get back to the content, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. Alright, so let's look over at some of the new cards coming out this October to see what I think is pretty decent in terms of change, and then maybe a couple cards that I think are I'm not quite sure how I feel about them. But the first we're going to talk about is Gundam Heavy Arms. This card right here is just a level 4, 3 cost, decent stats, but you can look at the top card of your deck, return to the top or bottom of your deck. Doesn't plus you, but it is going to try to help consistency, at least getting dead cards out the way so you can hopefully draw into better ones, and that's a step in the right direction. Now going to the next card in our list here, we actually have Elmith. We went over this a couple videos ago, but Elmith allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and reveal a green Xeon pilot. Not only are there a fair amount of them to choose from, but this is actually really cool because we don't have too many ways to search pilots right now. I think the only other way to search a pilot is also in green, being the path to victory or defeat. But being able to go top 5 for a green Xeon pilot is much needed consistency, and I hope we get more cards that just allow you to, within the house, within the archetype, really get into these different ways to make the consistency of your deck better. Next, we have got Gundam Age 1 Normal, and this guy, when you deploy him, if you meet the conditions of having 7 or more, or level 7 or higher, which is cool because you can do this on 6, make an EX token, and then our EX resource, and then draw a card. Either way, it's more card draw, and like I said before, this game desperately needs draw and search, so once again, it seems like they're peppering these effects in. And the last one that I think increases, like last at least unit that increases draw seen so far, is Gundam Barbados First Form. This is a level 3/2 cost, 3/2, and attack. If this unit's damaged, draw 1 card. Gonna be very easy to activate. The hard part is gonna see the hard part is going to be able to see how long you can keep this guy on board before they smash it. It's a high profile target. It's getting through shields, potentially, if it can swing like this. It's drawing a card. So realistically, if you pair it or link it, the first swing is going to be just a -1 overall interaction, but you have a body that's on the board, so that's pretty good. Second swing breaks even and you still have that body, and any turn he lives past the second swing is a straight plus, and that is destructive. So I do think that we are looking at a pretty decent amount of cards so far that just are going to add more ways to see more cards, and that's really what we need in this game. Now going into pilots, we have pilots like Shuji Ito. This is another scry effect, looking at the top card of your deck, deciding to keep it there or put it at the bottom, but once again, it's going to help bridge consistency. Fairly limited clan new type, but I think it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool that we do at least have a scry attached to every time you attack. More threats, that the longer you leave them on the board, the more damage they're able to do, or the more work they're able to put in. And I think that when you have more and more effects like this, you're really going to put even more of a focus on trading correctly to make sure your opponent can't just speed through their deck or make sure their draws are as optimal as possible. Next card on the list here is actually Flit Asuno, and Flit Asuno is going to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and actually allow you to take 1 green Earth Federation or 1 card with Age device in its name, as long as it's linked. So this is, again, very archetype specific, but it's going to be able to help you bridge that consistency in your deck, and this is the exact type of effect I think that we need in this game. Not generic show of resolves, not generic overflowing affections, not generic a new sign, which we will get to soon enough, but actual focused archetype thinning, because I think that's really what you need to do. Make it so it can't be splashed in every deck, but make it so that you can build around the advantage cards to have better damage. Next, we have another pilot. You have the Garrett Rand and Tifa Adil, and this is another one that's very in archetype searcher. When paired, you may discard one. If you do, look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may reveal 1 vulture card and add them to your hand. Return the remaining cards randomly to the bottom of your deck. So this is going to be searching one while helping you fill up your trash for these vulture effects. I think, like, once again, this is archetype specific, like, thinning, and I think that this is exactly where the game needs to go. The next card that I think is going to help shore up consistency quite a bit is going to be the Turning Point of History. A little well, I was going to say funky and wonky at the same time, because if you don't have a new type pilot on the board paired with something, you're not going to be able to draw. But to be able to scry 3 deep and rearrange, and then potentially draw the best card that you put on the top of your deck, is going to be an insanely good card. And I think an effect like this is going to do wonders for the way this game works. Then we have a new sign. New sign's kind of doubling down because this exact same effect already is lower on the curve for white, but this effect is really just going to like main draw 3 then discard 2. And I think that's really crazy. The burst is very archetype specific, but the draw 2 discard 3 is going to increase the range, and it actually may make blue as an obsolete splash, because if you splash white, you now have access to blockers, overflowing affection, and a new sign, and that's going to actually speed through your deck. Even though these are technically going to be break evens, they're still going to allow you to go through your deck at an accelerated speed, and so we're really gonna have to see about the consistency of these white decks. It's going to be crazy. So I'm also excited to see that. I'm also excited to see that to a degree, but we are kind of getting to this part where it feels like white has an unfair amount of thinning, but hey, that's a conversation for maybe a future video. Now moving on to an effect where I'm a little iffy about. We have got Gundam Barbados 4th form with suppression, and I think suppression's very interesting because most people are thinking about trying to rush him with suppression. I think early game there are too many blockers. I think early game there's a lot of different variables. I think where suppression's going to be the scariest is in a simplified game state. You guys are top decking for dear life, and then your opponent plays out a body that can take 2 shields from you, and instead of you having now 2 shields and the final life that needs to be taken, or the final attack needs to be taken, so your opponent top decks a suppression unit, or they top deck the pilot that goes with the suppression unit, and bam, they just took you from a 3-turn clock potentially to a 0-turn clock, well, a 2-turn clock. Like, you answer him this next one, or you play a blocker, you die. Like, and I think that this potentially could make a lot of the end of a lot of games really wonky, and we're gonna have to play test more. We're gonna have to see how purple lines up in the meta, but I just feel like this could get a lot of weirdness the further and further we get into the format come set 2. And then the last card I wanted to kind of talk about here is a little weird itself, but it's actually going to be the Argama. I think that the Argama is a very interesting card, mind you, but the base not being able to receive effect damage is going to be very bad for breach decks, and there is a deck in particular, cough cough Gundam Wing, that really focuses itself on having a fair amount of breach between Wing Gundam, between the Shenlong variants, things like that. And when you are playing a deck that heavily relies on breach, having another deck that just has a base that cannot be breached is really wild, especially in white where you can actually start playing blockers, because there are going to be some times where a Gundam Wing player may just lose because they face a Zeta player, and it has nothing to do with your skill as a pilot. You just happen to face a Zeta player, and like GG, they saw 2 Argama and put up blockers, and you know, your only chance was getting out of Wing 0, except you put down a Wing 0 and it got killed by a Zeta Gundam with a Camille under it, and then it was back to business as usual. I think that this is kind of a really scary card, and I am not quite sure how I feel about it, but again, we're gonna see its impact as we get to test more. So yeah. Now I want to talk about things I think this game could implement in order to make it a better game. So, to better fix this game, I think a couple of things could be implemented. I know that Bondi's structure is not going to really allow a best 2 out of 3. Like, I wanted this game to be 2 out of 3, but players can be a little slow sometimes, and I think Bondi would rather have shorter events in general. So I hit this with a different sort of angle. What if instead of having best of 3, we had partial mulligans? Now, for you guys that play Dragon Ball Super Masters now, you guys know what I'm talking about. You draw your opening hand, you keep the cards you want to keep, you put the rest of the cards into your deck, you shuffle, you redraw that number. That way, even if we don't have a lot of draw, even if we don't have a lot of search, we can at least make sure that our opening hand is as close to perfect as possible to make sure that we all get good starts to our game instead of actually having to, you know, just get blown out with no recourse if you mulligan and you brick after the mulligan and you draw into bricks with your 1 card per turn. I think that would be pretty cool. Besides that, I do think that every deck should have a way to draw additional cards, like maybe the suspension of a resource to draw a card, if that makes sense. And what I mean by suspension is like maybe another zone where you could take a resource and put it into that for a full turn. Like when your next turn comes around, you do not have access to that resource, so it affects your level and what you're able to pay for in cost, but you can trade it for a draw. That way, on your turn 1, you could have, well, you wouldn't want to really do it on turn 1 because you'd still be at level 1 the following turn. But late game, when you have nothing you can really use, but you have 7 resources, you could potentially put 2 resources to the side to draw 2 cards and then pass to your next turn. And then your next turn, you'll be back at level 5, but you'll go up to level 6 with 6 total resources and 2 suspended. Then the following turn, you'll spring back up to 8 unless, you know, well, actually to 9, I guess, unless you actually, you know, just suspend more resources. Either way, I think there needs to be some sort of system to accrue more cards so that games don't just feel like top deck fest once we get past turn 7 or so, and you know, games can have a better flow of what to go. I'm not saying that suspension system would be perfect, I'm just saying that I think it would be cool. If you guys want me to try to implement some of these things to see how games would go, let me know, because I could do some gameplays to show you how a partial mulligan could potentially make the game better, or maybe a suspension system can make the game better, and maybe we get some enough eyes on it to where Bondi actually pays attention, who knows. But I think those 2 things could be steps to really helping this game become more consistent and competitively friendly. That being said, I think past that, we just need to see how the game goes. As we get more and more sets, obviously power creep will work in a good way, but we need to see ways to accrue cards in hand via search and draw be accessible to all colors, not just blue and white. And we're starting to see some really cool things in purple. We're starting to see some very unique effects in green, but I do think that we need to make sure that these cards are plussing, not just fixing the top of your deck, not just breaking even, but plussing so that we can actually play the game at a steady pace instead of just dwindling out on hand and kind of having that fall to the wayside. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know what your current experiences on the game are, and let me know how you guys are loving Gundam the card game and how excited you guys are for set 2. Put it all in the comment section. I'm gonna spend some time this weekend answering them. So yeah, thank you guys, and I will see you in the next video. One more time, remember to like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you want to join the EagleX fam today, and check out my second channel, EuniverseX, for all of my video gaming and anime and manga videos, as well as my Twitter that I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers. So just go over there in the description, like it, you know, all those things. So yeah, I will see you guys later. Peace.